This is a zoning item before the council for consideration tonight. Zoning item is to consider ordinance amending our city ordinances for the Heritage Overlay District, which restricts certain types of businesses within the Heritage Overlay District.
So Mr. Stevenson said this came before the zoning board earlier this month, and there was some discussion on it as to whether or not they should allow this in the Heritage Overlay District. But the zoning board does recommend approval of the ordinance to take pawn shops out of the prohibited use list in the Heritage Overlay District.
We don't have a problem with pawn shops in Mineola. We just don't feel like it needs to be downtown. The distance for pawn shops is 1,000 feet as the crow flies, which means there would not be another pawn shop in the historic overlay district. Since that meeting, we have found that that is only the case in counties over 250,000 people. So that opens it up to pawn shops anywhere in the historic district.
My name is Rob Carter, and my wife is Michelle Carter. This is simply a request to open dialogue concerning the business diversity in downtown, or the lack thereof. It has been suggested that the Main Street exclusion of pawn shops in the heritage designation could be at risk if we allow a pawn shop downtown. This is ridiculous. We were informed that we would be required to obtain approval for our sign. After meeting with the Landmark Commission, we garnered that approval. The idea that this would open Pandora's box is a small-minded and elementary argument. My family has been here for over 5 generations. So for the downtown business owners that have been operating here for years to think that we do not care about this community is absurd. Our concern is that with the overhead and expenses that we could, almost necessary to have the additional revenue that the pawn procurement process would bring. Also, that would be a predominant way of us procuring items. The city subscribes to a program called Leads Online. It's a national web-based organization that takes every item from anyone who will report. You don't have to be a pawn shop. Any of the bicycle trade shops can do it.
It's not a pawn shop that will hurt our community, but the closed-mindedness and antiquated ways of a small portion of merchants and citizens.
My wife runs a shop in Mineola, and we do our best to try to buy what we need here.
So if you make this, if you approve this, where anybody can come in and open up another pawn shop, then the next day, our business goes up for sale.
I like pawn shops, but they have a place.
We decide to withdraw from Main Street or fail to the certification process due to budgetary constraints at the state level, it's at high risk that we can't re-enter.
And I'd just like to see it stay that somewhat.
My husband and son love pawn shops. We have nothing against pawn shops. It's just that we don't feel like that that's what we need.
The item B is to consider action to amend the zoning ordinance to allow pawn shops in the Heritage Preservation Overlay District, Section 5-2G2.
I make a motion that on item B, we do not change the heritage overlay as it is in our ordinance today.
In my opinion, working against you, is that if we allow one, we have to allow many. But,
One lady called and said she absolutely did not want the ordinance changed. But before we finished our conversation, she said, oh, but I would like the signage changed.
But I'm afraid of the person who isn't interested in running a business with the type of ethics that you talk about. It really, really concerns me.
All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
This is what makes this country great. It's a democratic process.